Hey everyone, glad you could all join us today as this is a pretty exciting day here at Trekyards. As always and forevermore, I am your host, Captain Foley.
And I'm your other host, Commander Cockings, and today is Trekyards' 1 year anniversary. 1 year today, our first episode was released. Episode 1, the TOS Bird of Prey.
So, in honor of that great and momentous event, we bring you a special episode. Now, if you will recall, our very first test episode, or episode 0,
Or Cage Pilot, you could say.
was not initially released as we used it as a test bed to see what the show would look like with all the elements in place. So all the edited bells and whistles. We did eventually release it as a special gift to you guys, so you could see us from our humble beginnings.
Now, that episode was on the Tholian web spinner, as seen in the TOS episode Tholian web, as well as the Enterprise version.
Yes, and we will include a link to that old episode 0 in the description below, so you can look back and see just how far we've come.
And as proof of how far we have come, we're going to do a more general Tholian episode, which incorporates many of the same information of that first episode, but shiny new and more refined Trekyards elements, the new awesome bits and the bits you expect from us, just to show you exactly how far we've come in 365 days from those humble and some could say embarrassing beginnings. Yeah.
Now, don't misunderstand us. This will not be the exact same episode, just all polished up. We have included additional information about the Tholians and their various ships, while still focusing mainly on the web spinner or shard class design. We have even arranged for a special guest in the form of Mr. John Eaves to join us. So maybe you can call this a remastered or reimagined episode, if you will. Plus, any information we do not include in this episode will likely be found in the older one. So sit back and enjoy and see just how far we've come.
You could say we're the TNG Blu-ray remasters now, aren't we? Brand spanking new CG and everything.
New color and everything. Check this out.
Yeah, all saturated and everything. So, facts and trivia. Let's begin at the beginning, as it were. As with most Star Trek, official canon, as well as side canon, exists, obviously. But the side canon in Starfleet Battles, video games, FASA. When it comes to the Tholians, however, there are many different stories and interpretations, as it were. And we're going to give you some of the most interesting ones. But if you want to read up on lots of, all the information for Tholians, you can look on the internet and stuff. It's all great stuff, but this is some of the best bits.
So let's give you a brief history of the Tholians. There really isn't much in canon, so we're going to delve into the territory of Starfleet Battles, tabletop game, as they really flesh the Tholians out beyond their first appearance in Star Trek TOS. So, according to Starfleet Battles, the Tholians are not native to our galaxy and are in fact the survivors of a race that once dominated their home galaxy called M81, also referred to as Bode's galaxy, the location of which still remains unknown. They were in fact refugees that escaped a terrible uprising that nearly wiped out their species. But don't feel too bad for them. This uprising was done by a subservient race that the Tholians had controlled and used for generations. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Upon arriving here in our galaxy, they called themselves the Tholian Assembly. Okay, and immediately started annexing many systems, including ones that belonged to the Klingon Empire, hence building themselves a rather large territory patch rather quickly. And these annexed systems were in fact at the extreme edge of Klingon-controlled territory, so it wasn't immediately noticed by Klingons that, they'd stolen the territory. But when they did find out, it was almost too late, as the Tholians had really dug in with those amazing claws. Needless to say, many skirmishes with the Klingons ensued.
The Tholians are extremely xenophobic, territorial, and value punctuality and strict protocols above all else. They fled their galaxy when a subservient race called the Siltorians, that were genetically engineered by the Tholians to be the primary servant race, revolted against their Tholian masters. The Siltorians were 6-foot-tall insectoids, whom were the only race that the Tholians allowed to maintain a fleet of ships, as they were responsible for keeping the other races ruled by the Tholians in line. They're basically the bouncers for the Tholians.
I like it. Yeah, that is a pretty interesting Starfleet Battle story. They definitely came up with some interesting ideas before Star Trek was back on TV. So back to the Tholians. Now, having arrived some 200 years ago, by an unknown means, they settled on the edge of our galaxy in the Spiral Arm, which, as we just mentioned, was very close to Klingon territory in some older star charts. The mysterious way they travelled here is compounded by the fact they were somehow able to bring their entire planet with them, which was their provincial capital at the time. This later became Tholia, though, the capital of the Tholian Assembly. Really cool, though.
Mm-hmm. It has since been speculated that they were able to access some sort of interdimensional rifts, as many encounters with them over the years have involved strange and bizarre natural phenomenon, including spatial rifts, as well as strange temporal disturbances.
In the later years, more Tholians actually arrived from the other galaxy, and these new additions were called Neo Tholians, and brought with them new ship designs and a new mentality and design philosophy. Known as the 312th Battle Fleet, these ships that were brought with them were larger, better designed, and included 12 warships, 2 dreadnoughts, 4 heavy cruisers, and 6 light cruisers, plus a whole plethora of other smaller ships. And in fact, these fresh ships were constructed in their home galaxy and didn't actually bring any shipyards with them.
Yeah, and due to different technologies and materials, these new ships could not be repaired or rebuilt if damaged extensively, using only the current shipyards that they had here. So these Neo ships never ventured far from Tholian-controlled star bases, or if they did, they were heavily escorted by a small flotilla of expendable or repairable new ships constructed in our galaxy, so that these valuable assets would not be lost.
Because this mysterious migration to our galaxy, it's not even really known if the Tholians had originally come from our own dimension, an alternate one, or even perhaps a different time, since they seem to have more advanced technology than whatever was around at the time.
So a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago. No, maybe.
Yeah. Hey, these are not the usual Vong here. These are Tholians. Keep going.
The Tholians are a hermaphroditic species, meaning that they have no specific sex, but instead have both male and female characteristics as needed. They have a hard outer crystalline anatomy, and the fact that they live in extreme temperatures, with the inside of their vessels reaching around 480 degrees Kelvin, or about 2,907 degrees centigrade, makes any interactions with them extremely problematic under most circumstances. Their species is also divided up into different classes or castes, much like bees in a hive, including workers, warriors, and an upper echelon known as the caste mute, which serve as their governing body, or lattice as they call it.
Cool, okay. But since we're all here to talk about the ships, and obviously we're looking at the Tholian web spinner, this was obviously first seen in the TOS episode Tholian Web, and was in fact the very last new and original design created for the series. And this TOS era ship is sometimes referred to as the Shard class. We do see an updated, or maybe backdated, retro, I don't know, version of this design in Star Trek Enterprise, designed by Mr. John Eaves. The ships were extremely powerful, especially for their, well, very, very small size, and even in Enterprise, a couple of Tholian ships were able to take out a very powerful Vulcan combat cruiser, the Trekyards class, which was one of the most technologically advanced ships of its era.
When the first Tholians initially arrived in our galaxy, they only brought with them one active shipyard, and as such were only able to produce this one class of vessel early on. As we just mentioned, this is referred to as the Shard class. They eventually went on to produce larger and more diversified ships, but early on they either welded or in some cases were able to magnetically link several of these smaller craft together to configure larger ship classes, such as those seen in Starfleet battles.
Be cool if they could combine like Species A472 did, just like all sort of come together and fire an even bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Starfleet Battles actually offered up even more Tholian ships over the years with many different classes and sizes. Most of these designs, however, consisted of the smaller Tholian ship being linked together with small variations of the standard Shard class shape. Yeah, so just really different variations of the same design, and this is the fun part. So some of these ship classes were the Felspar class, it's an escort, the Quartz class, destroyer, the Garnet class, a light cruiser, the Ruby class, heavy cruiser, sensing a pattern here, Amethyst class, battle cruiser, Sapphire class, destroyer, and the seldom seen Emerald class, which is a juggernaut. No Diamond class though, guys. And they also had a Black Widow carrier, which carried 8 fighters, with each of those being magnetically mounted onto the exterior of the craft. Although I got to ask Stuart, so Emerald, Amethyst, Sapphire class, these are our words. Why would they name classes of ship based on Earth minerals? That seems odd.
Well, minerals are pretty standard throughout the galaxy, but it's probably just a translation thing. We just translated them into crystals that were similar to ours. I don't know.
So are they the same color then? Is there a blue ship and a red ship and a green ship and a...
No, they're all pretty much the same color, which is like a coppery color or a yellow color for Tholians in Starfleet battles. So.
That's just us again then, isn't it? Just the... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just us being humans. I don't know. The main exception to this rule, of course, being the Neo-Tholian ship called the TK-5, which was essentially a regular Shard-class vessel paired to the rear half of a small Klingon F-5 frigate.
Kit bashing at its best.
Exactly. We're just not quite sure how the Tholians acquired so many K-5 hulls. We just assume it's in those border skirmishes with the Klingons, and it's just one of the most designs that fit their ships the best. So, as you can see in the first versions of this ship, they retain much of their very Klingon appearance. However, this design was eventually heavily modified by the Tholians to appear much more like the Neo-Tholian crafts that later joined the fray. And the new style of ship was soon being built, which sported a new rear hull configuration, albeit with a more Tholian design style. So I guess the Tholians that first arrived here really liked the style of ships from their old galaxy, which makes sense. But without having the ability to construct those yet, with a very limited shipyard, they instead captured Klingon ships and then retrofitted the secondary hulls of those Klingon ships onto their ships. So later, when the Neo-Tholians arrived with the heavy dreadnoughts, as you can see beside us, it's easy to see the design style that they were actually going for. So they did a pretty good job, I think.
So Tholian Shard class ships, or web spinners, the fun name, were highly maneuverable and usually consisted of only 4 phaser ones and generally no secondary weaponry. However, there were variants that were armed with small plasma bolt light weaponry, which we saw in Enterprise, although mirror ones, I guess, albeit nowhere near as large or as powerful as the Romulan plasma torpedoes, which are obviously a whole different ball game. However, the most notable and unique weaponry is the web generators, which are actually not weapons, they're modified tractor emitters. Pretty advanced ones, though, to be fair. The web emitters are capable of creating web grenades, that'd be cool to see, or spheres, which could be launched and used to impact enemy shields or hulls, or of course for creating webs, the famous ones. These webs were formed by at least 2 ships linking together and forming an energized force field or web between them. Webs were usually used to capture, damage, or even slow down enemy ships.
Tholian ships were able to pass through and fire through these webs without expending any additional energy to do so. Enemy ships could not, and if they in fact tried to pass through, severe damage, either shielding, hulls, or extreme power depletion was the result. The webs were simply highly developed tractor beams that could take damage and did in fact dissipate over time. In the event that there were not 2 Tholian ships present, the Tholians have been known to maneuver and use large asteroids as anchor points to begin web construction.
There are numerous types of web designs to suit different purposes, with the main 2 being linear, which extends between 2 anchor points, and globular, which was laid in a circle as anchored to itself. The web building procedure varied in the amount of time it took to establish, all dependent on the number and type of Tholian ship present, as well as local space conditions and terrain, and of course being dependent on the status or even energy availability per ship.
Sometimes it was only a matter of establishing anchor points and infusing those points with energy, which resulted in a rather quick construction, as seen in the episode In a Mirror Darkly. Or alternatively, as we see in the TOS episode Tholian Web, sometimes it's a slow crawl to establish a workable web.
Very slow crawl. But it was for the plot and everything. Anyway.
And yeah, there was that space that they couldn't distort the fabric of because you needed to move slow. Anyway.
So it was the Tholians of the 22nd century mirror universe that were responsible for the USS Defiant, which we of course saw in the TOS episode Tholian Web, to phase through the dimensional rift into the mirror universe. This action almost dragged Captain Kirk there as well, which meant that Kirk would have met the evil Archer, assuming Tholians didn't kill him, of course. But come on, it's Kirk. Tholian.
Kirk Fu.
Yeah, easy. Also, Tholians were mentioned again in TNG, as they were responsible for the destruction of the Federation starbase in 2353, with the only survivor being Kyle Riker, Commander Riker's father.
Later in Star Trek Online, the Tholians are featured yet again with some very formidable-looking ship designs, including the Tarantula-class dreadnought, the Recluse battleship, Orb Weaver cruiser, Mesh Weaver frigate, and the smallest of these being the Widow, which is just a basic freighter craft. The Tarantula-class dreadnought actually has web material incorporated into its design. They appear almost as 3 sails or 3 protrusions sticking out of the ship, so it's a very interesting look. Yet all these ships very much retain that very distinct Tholian feel. It's, they stick with what works, so that's good on them.
But now on to behind the scenes, and we've got a little treat for you guys, because what better to do for you than to bring the man who helped design the other Tholian ship. As we said before, Tholians did reappear Enterprise in the Season 2 episode Future Tense, and of course they needed an updated look, and the responsibility fell on the one and only John Eaves. So let's bring in Mr. John Eaves.
Howdy, man.
So, as we all should know, because we did the first one last year, we are on the Tholian, and this is the one you designed, John.
Yes, that was one of my favorites.
Good first point. So, what did you think when you first got called upon to make the new, old, updated, retro Tholian ship?
What was the funnest thing of Enterprise was to take the old ships. Because sooner or later we'd know they'd show up in a script. And I was kind of waiting for the Tholian. I remember when it came up, the little Romulan was the other one that we're anxiously waiting to have happen. But that Tholian one, that was always my favorite as a kid. It scared the crud out of me when they're making that web around the ship. But Hua Chang design. We kind of decided in the art department to do more of the retro stuff. They wouldn't have minded if we would have done like whole new designs to submit, but we tried so hard to keep that retro accountability alive.
Now, what did you think of the original TOS Tholian design, and exactly what design cues did you take from it?
You know, when they would show it on film from a front point of view, it didn't look like it was symmetrical because they always had the camera at a different angle. So it looked like it was off-center to me. I didn't know it was like a tripodial kind of design. And the model was over at Profiles in History for sale at one point. And I'm looking, it's just basically a block of wood. Literally was painted some screen on the side. And I was looking, I go, oh my gosh, it's symmetrical all the way around. But they filmed it differently, so you didn't really get a chance to see it that way on the front-on shots. And so seeing it that way, it was nice to see the original model when I started doing those designs on it. And it was a pretty easy one to do. Not a lot of detail on it. And with the Enterprise stuff, we couldn't do like literal 60s style designs and then go back to the 50s because it just wouldn't fly. So we had to do the panel lining and all the stuff to make it fit in that Enterprise world. But at least got to keep the aesthetics of the original shape.
So is that just the big thing? Just keep the same shape and then just...
Yeah, I hope it went through approval okay. Yeah, and luckily it did. So, and trying to pull back just the architecture a little bit. So keeping the main, kind of the dimensions and the angles of the ship was kind of what the starting point was from. And I did 2 versions of it, and one has the tail as the one that got approved, and the other one had kind of an inset offset area in the back. So it was like an ice cream cone without the ice cream in it. Mm-hmm. And that one was the first one I did. And I was looking at it, I go, it needs a little bit something extra. So adding the little back piece. And it was funny because the Aurora jet was the secret Aurora was kind of the big thing at the time. And I thought I saw it fly over once. I lived out by Edwards Air Force Base. And one day this crazy double triangle thing flew over the house. It kind of looked like the Tholian ship. And I called them up and I asked, hey, you flying that? They wouldn't say anything, but I had a friend that worked in the museum. But that's what kind of inspired the back end of that elongate as it does.
And ironically enough, the Tholian ship was used for the Aurora in TOS as well.
Yeah, there you go. Enterprise was different because I didn't go to the meetings that we used to on Deep Space Nine. Would all go to the meetings, and in Enterprise we did maybe a couple, but the majority of them was Herman would go and submit the artwork, or Louise Dorton would. And so we weren't a part. We just anxiously wait till they come back. Okay, and if it had a little red star on it, it'd hold it up, and if it didn't, it'd have circles everywhere.
Oh.
So
it's like my high school work.
Like say, they'd pass the drawing around, and so everyone would look at it, and we'd get to Rick Berman, and he'd look at it, and they'd look over at Brandon, and Brandon would look at it, and they'd talk to each other, and they'd either circle it or not. But it was kind of fun to see those. I have all the drawings that have those little circles and squiggly notes on them, so they were fun.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, so John, you were developing these ships in the 2000s, but did you know there were earlier designs in Starfleet battles in the 1980s? So we've showed you some of these designs, but did you know of them beforehand? Did they even influence you?
No, I never saw the stuff before, and I was kind of in a strange bubble of Star Trek history before and the stuff going on. There were a couple novels out that I enjoyed collecting the artwork on, but I hadn't seen a lot of stuff. Yeah, now that I saw them, they're pretty cool. It's kind of funny to see the designs, and it's just ironic to see that Star Trek lineage, they obviously were trying to do the same thing, but had to do a little bit of changes and stuff with the artwork. And the Arch one kind of has the Valdor type look, like a Valdor and a Tholian combined. But they tried to do the same thing, keep that main architectural lines going along, but make it their own. So they're pretty cool.
So John, if the show was back, if you had to do another Tholian ship, but how do you design a bigger Tholian ship, maybe a capital ship or a cruiser? How would you take it beyond this very small... We don't even know what it is necessarily. Yeah.
I'd probably keep the original shape there. I might probably expand it where it's a cone inside a cone this time and make it more elaborate and a little bit longer, and kind of keep the same structure. I might do a little bit of inset detail and maybe broaden that out a little bit, where you have the insets in between the two structural planes. Just kind of puff that up to give you more room for armament or crew, and might spend a little time detailing the back where you have the web maker. Spend a little bit more time on that area. So, because it's kind of ethereal, that whole where the web actually comes out of the back of the ship, and obviously it was just animation, and we didn't even have the opportunity to do that on our new one because it wasn't a part of the script. But that'd be a neat area to kind of detail, work out.
So Star Trek Online used the Tholians again and created new ships for their fleet. What do you think of some of those designs that we showed you?
The big huge ship I thought was pretty cool. I like the color patterns on it. That the deep dark colors and the kind of the blue light insets was pretty cool. And it looks like they had a whole kind of line of various scales and stuff. So they had some fun stuff going on in there. And it looks like when it's open, we did this one ship, a Gorn ship. And it kind of looks like maybe that might have played part because I think they got all of the drawings from CBS when they started the show. I think that's all allowed to them to use and whatever they want. And so I've seen a couple things. I think a couple of the guys that do the concept of work are Facebook friends. I'll see stuff every once in a while, but I haven't met any of those guys in person. But someone was saying that they get all that stuff as reference, and like I don't know what their rules are, if they have to use them or they're allowed to like use and adapt or what they do. But it's interesting to see some cool stuff.
So do they get a John seal of approval?
I liked it.
Last thing, what's your one favourite thing about what you did, and what's your one least favourite thing if you had to pick one for each?
I didn't have a lot of scrutiny on that one. I liked that the guys that did the CG modeling did great. I actually liked that one all the way around. I don't think I would have changed really anything on it, so I was happy with it.
Well, thanks, John, for joining us for this anniversary episode, and we look forward to speaking to you on many more occasions about many more of your ships.
Look forward to it.
And that was it. Thank you, John. And that is the updated look for the Tholians, their ships, their technology, their expanded universe backstory, which is very cool. And even what the man himself, John Eaves, thinks of their designs. Wow.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to John.
Yeah.
It's fun learning what he thinks. So
yeah.
It has been an honor and a privilege entertaining you all over the past year, and we have only just scratched the surface of Trek subject matter. We hope you enjoyed this episode on the Tholians and their ships. Looking back at the original script for this first test episode really showed me how far we have come and how much we have updated and refined our show and our process for creating these episodes. We really do enjoy putting these shows together and love to hear your reactions to them. Please join us on Facebook, as we are always sharing new ship pictures and having great discussions. And go visit Trekyards.com or search Trekyards on YouTube and follow us from our very first episode all the way to the present. If you can donate to the show to help us out, that would be great, as we have a donate button on the website for that very reason. If you want to make a one-time donation, or if you watch our show on a regular basis, please support our Patreon, which helps us out on a monthly basis. Until next time, this is Team Trekyards,
Commander Cockings,
and Captain Foley, saying thanks for making Trekyards what it is today and what it will continue to be, as we boldly go where no web series has gone before. Get it? I said web series. Tholian web series.
I got it. Here's to another year of Trekyards and our terrible jokes. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.